Can you hear me well? Okay, great. Someone told me today from a Zoom, I had a Zoom and it was great, the sound. And in the next Zoom, someone said they couldn't hear me and I wasn't sure if it was me or them. You know, you don't know, you never know who's at fault. Or not at fault, but who has spotty internet. Okay. We're gonna wait one more minute and then we'll just the two of us will get started. Let everybody know that we're starting. Okay, we are on page 52 of the book. So let's just review quickly. There's the Hebrew section on page 52. That's the original text in Hebrew. Then you have the italicized, which is the translation of the original text. And then you have the regular print, and that's Rabbi Tursky's interpretation of the original text. So just so that we're clear who's speaking at each point. So we're going to start with the section that the Ramchal himself did, the italicized portion on page 52. And also, you know, we're beginning Yom HaShoah now here in Israel all the way through tomorrow. And so it's really appropriate. We're going to dedicate today's class to a elevation of the souls of everybody lost in the Shoah, as well as asking for them to advocate on behalf of our soldiers today, captured today, that they should come home quickly, speedily, and with a complete healing. God put man in a place where there are many factors which can detract a person from him being God. There are the physical desires which a person indulges in them, cause him to progressively distance himself from true good. Thus, a man is actually placed in the midst of a raging battle, because everything that he will encounter in the world, whether good or bad, are ordeals for a person. The theme, ordeals for a person, is fully developed by the Ramchal in the Way of God, where he states that this is a pervasive theme throughout a person's life. Life is nothing but a series of challenges of varying types and degrees, which a person must overcome, and which are all tests of his loyalty and devotion to God. People of lesser capacity are given relatively minor tests. People of greater spiritual strength are more stringently tested, all the way to the patriarch Abraham, who was put through the 10 ordeals, the most trying of being the commandment to sacrifice his son Yitzchak. The theme of being tested runs through much of Torah literature. In Dvarim, Deuteronomy, it is predicted that there will be false prophets who would preach against Torah and will perform great supernatural miracles as evidence of their authenticity. As divine emissaries, Moses warns us not to heed their words of these false prophets. As for their miracles, they are nothing but situations whereby God wishes to test our devotion and loyalty to him. The Talmud relates a fascinating episode, an intense halachic dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the other sages, who constituted the vast majority. According to Torah law, the opinion of the majority must be accepted. But Rabbi Eliezer invoked several miracles to prove his point, and finally appeared to heaven for judgment, eliciting a heavenly voice which proclaimed, "Why do you dispute with him whose opinion prevails everywhere?" The other sages were adamant, saying that the Torah requires acceptance of the majority. Even a divine decree cannot alter its authority. Rabbeinu Nissim explains that in this episode was a divine test, the mettle of the sages, whether they would adhere to the rule of the Torah or be overwhelmed by a miraculous phenomenon. We humble mortals, so far removed from the greatness of the patriarchs or the sages of the Talmud, are not subjected to such severe tests, but we are tested according to our capacities. Primarily, our tests are whether we will surrender to the ingenious rationalizations which we can devise to justify yielding to physical desires, even when these are forbidden. The Baal Shem Tov gave a parable of a king who wished to test the loyalty of his subjects and engage someone to circulate among the people and incite them to defy his orders. Some foolish people to succumb to the arguments of the agent, whereas the wise reason it is possible that a king is so powerful would tolerate anybody preaching defiance. The fact that this person is permitted to do so can only be because the king has allowed it as a test to our loyalty. If we are wise enough to realize that Yetzer Hara is merely a tool of God to test our allegiance, turning a deaf ear to wily arguments is quite simple. Okay. Hi, everybody who's joining us. We were just reading on page 52. So I think this is a really interesting concept. And as we know, this idea of being tested comes up again and again and again when it comes to Judaism and it comes to spirituality. And, you know, we're on Yom HaShoah. Hi, Shlomi, you can't say like, what are these tests? How can it be that someone who's so loving, who's so gracious, we have bitachon, who's so good, would just give us tests, which are really challenging to each person, their own incredibly challenging tests. And I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting question. I don't have, you know, the perfect answer to it, but I think that we definitely see that to accomplish any greatness, there is this concept of needing to be tested. You know, in secular literature, you have, you know, King Arthur had to get the sword out of this, you know, throughout all history, there is this concept of being worthy of something great. And the greatness that we're trying to achieve is this closeness to God, this closeness to him in the world to come, that this entire world is a place to develop ourselves, to develop our character, and that only comes through engaging with these tests. And I think it's something interesting because in the moment, they are super unpleasant and they are super scary and full of uncertainty. But something that he says again and again and again when we read Char Bitachon is the first rule of every test is to remember you're not going to succeed alone. Succeeding in every test includes deciding to fight, making a plan to succeed, then asking for God to help, because the outcome, even of divine tests, isn't always in our hands. I think that's something to really take with us into this thing that can be very triggering for anybody who, every single human being is going to experience discomfort and tests in this world. He just told us that. So it's triggering if you've already experienced many tests in your life, sometimes to be told, well, this is good for you, right? It's not pleasant to hear, this is good for you. And then especially if, God forbid, we think about the tests that people we love are going through, it's a whole different one. We don't have the capacity to handle their test, therefore we can't, all we have is empathy for them. So it's just something I want to bring up. And if anybody has, you know, wants to discuss something about this before continuing the conversation, I'm happy to hold space for anybody who has thoughts on this. Okay. Feel free. Anybody stop me if you have something to say. Okay.
Well, I've got a little vignette, so I don't remember where it's from. It's not about me personally, although I do try and work on myself for this one. It's not so easy, but I do understand there's something in it. It was something to do with Yitzhak and Rivka praying for a child, and it was to do with a Rebbe who somebody had come to him for a bracha about having children, and the Rebbe suggested to her that she and her husband not pray for children, but pray and thank Hashem for giving them no children until now, for putting them in that space, and to literally get to themselves in a place of gratitude for putting them in the place of no children, and to connect with that. And then when they did, they were blessed with children, that was the story. And I kind of understand that there's something in that. It's like, it's easier for me than saying somebody to say to, oh, it's good for you, but rather to have you yourself meditate and connect on what is healing in that space of, and it sounds harsh to say because I've got children and it seems insensitive, but everybody's got their own on, right? And so I don't have a husband at the minute. And sometimes I think to myself, do you know, I've got all this space to do the things I like, to work on myself. Maybe I'm getting ready for my husband, but this space is a good space for me to be in right now. And how do I know that it's good? Because I'm in it. Hashem would not have put me in the space if it wasn't good. So that was all I had to say about that.
And we see that directly in the Shar B'Tachon, because remember, he says dealing with loneliness, connect to God and remember all the things that you have time to do and space to do when you are alone. Oh, you have a family and you're struggling with the responsibilities and demands and worries.
Yeah.
Be grateful for what you have, that in the moment that you have it. You couldn't have said it more beautifully. So we're on the bottom of page 53. Okay. I'm keep you for a bit. Okay. A person may be tried by poverty on one hand, by wealth on the other. I might become affluent and deny God, or I might become impoverished and steal. A person is thus caught in a battle from fore and from the rear. If he is victorious on all fronts, he will be the complete man who will succeed in uniting himself with God. When he leaves the antechamber, this earthly world, to enter the palace, the eternal world, he will bask in the light of the divine splendor to the extent that one has subdued his evil inclination and desires, avoided those factors which detract from good, and exerted himself to become united with the good. To that extent, he will attain it and he will rejoice in it. We're going to keep reading, but I just want to remind everyone again, like, reason I am so passionate about health and working on your health is when you are on a health journey, you have to confront this concept all the time. Which are my desires that are for my good and which are my desires that are not for my good? And every time, there's nothing wrong with having desires. That's part of living in an abundant, beautiful world full of amazing things and food and all kinds of experiences. But there are experiences and times that are appropriate and inappropriate, ones that are helpful and ones that are harmful. And each time that we navigate through that small space, just in our food or in our money or in our health, as the, Shar B'Tachon talks about each one, it's practice for all the other areas of life that we have to make these same determinations, right? Is this good or is this only temporarily pleasurable? And I just think it's something that one of the reasons I'm just so passionate about health and wellness and well-being, and from a Jewish spiritual perspective, is when you look at dealing with cravings or dealing with health or making healthy choices from spiritual practice, it just really takes a lot of this emotional connection to the food itself. But I always have to have ice cream. Okay, so I have this desire in my nature for ice cream. I heard something very interesting on the topic of money also recently. They said at the beginning, we're a soul and we're given a character to play in this round of the game, right? And again, when they talk about a test or a struggle, what's a video game but a character going through a series of struggles, a series of tests in order to achieve a win? And that we can find incredibly pleasurable, right? To be tested and to succeed. So this whole part of being tested is also a mindset and how we look at it, right? When we look at it as we're a character and we've been given this character, this avatar, money or I don't have money, it doesn't matter. That's the character I'm playing in the test I'm going to have. Right now, I'm playing the character of someone who doesn't have money, and I need to overcome those obstacles in order to win the game. Or I get to be right now I'm the character who does have money, and I have to overcome different obstacles. And it's so getting out of unzipping from this world culture that having money makes you worthy and not having money makes you unworthy, that it's just irrelevant. It's given from God. So this is your character. And the same thing with having health. We can cultivate health through our choices, but whether or not we have health is a divine gift. You can take a lot of healthy behaviors and not have health. And that's not your fault. Somebody who is healthy and somebody who isn't healthy, we don't have to blame the person for their current circumstance. What we always want to be doing is cultivating our best behaviors based on the set of character that we're playing at the moment. And the winning the game is the greatest joy beyond human comprehension. So it's worth playing, and it's worth being playful sometimes in our challenges, to see them as something that's a little lighter than it feels in the moment. And I'm saying this to myself as much of you guys, because my challenges also feel very heavy sometimes. And when you do lighten it to, oh, I'm going to play this character who's going through this challenge, and you give that little bit of emotional distance, in acceptance commitment therapy, they talk about like moving those negative thoughts and putting them on a TV screen. So they're not you, they're thoughts you're having. You is your essential soul, your essential self. Okay. The Talmud states that on Judgment Day, the nations of the world will dispute the right of Israel and its reward, arguing that Israel did not observe the Torah. God will then call Nimrod, the king of the Chaldeans, who threw the patriarch Abraham into the fiery furnace when he repudiated idolatry, to testify of Abraham's withstanding this test of his loyalty to God. He called Laban to testify how the patriarch Jacob had served him faithfully, even though he repeatedly cheated him. He will call the wife of Potiphar to testify how Joseph had resisted her seduction. Rabbi Yerucham Leibowitz points out that the essence of this Talmudic passage is that evil itself will testify how it was overcome by the righteous. Again, we're going into Yom HaShoah. You know, let's make every single horrible, evil person who committed those crimes have to testify about the sanctity in heaven of every single person who we're going to light a candle for, who we're learning in their merit. They have to testify on the righteousness and purity of every single person who they harmed. And something to think about. Hasidic teachings extend this principle to explaining that nothing could exist in the universe without some nucleus of godliness within it. Hence, even evil must have an unactuated spark of divinity that enables its existence. When the righteous triumph over evil, they withdraw the spark of divinity, causing the evil to disintegrate into nothingness, and reuniting all the alienated sparks of divinity in their origin. Man's successful survival of the trials with which he is challenged thus results in the eradication of all evil from the world. It is only natural for a person to desire tranquility, as natural as seeking food when hungry, water when thirsty. The Ramchal makes us aware, however, that as desirable as it may be, tranquility accomplishes nothing, and struggle is the only constructive aspect of life. This is stated in the Midrash when Rashi quotes in Genesis, and after suffering the persecution from Esau, the 20 years of anguish with Laban, the patriarch Jacob wished to live in tranquility, whereupon God said, tranquility is not for this world, tranquility is for the world to come. And Jacob was then subjected to the distress of the disappearance of his beloved son Joseph. How would Jacob have utilized tranquility? He was not one to pursue idle pastimes. The Torah testifies that Jacob was a perfect person who spent his time in the pursuit of knowledge of God. During the 14 years that he studied at the Academy of Shem, he did not have a single night of full sleep. Clearly, if Jacob had been free of distractions, he would have devoted himself to totality to the pursuit of godliness. What was wrong with that? The answer is found in the verse of Job. Adam le'amal yulad, man was created to labor. A logic may dictate that tranquility is a desirable state, but divine wisdom dictates otherwise. When a person is in a state of tranquility, he achieves nothing. His purpose on earth is to withstand trials. It is important for us to realize that pleasant and desirable as tranquility may be, this should not be a goal we pursue. Having positioned the world was created for man to achieve a state of spirituality, to be able to benefit from the infinite benevolence of God. The question remains, for what was everything else in the world created? What is the purpose of everything else in existence? This is a very big thought. And I don't have, the authority to say any of this. He does. It's been proven throughout Jewish history. This is a classic Jewish book of thought and spirituality. But we see this in all modern speakers of personal development. Talk about getting out of your comfort zone. There's no growth in your comfort zone. You have to embrace uncertainty. You have to embrace things that are uncomfortable. And the more that we desire comfort, which is normal, it's not going to lead us to grow. And so they say it in like softer words. So we can borrow some of their words, but recognize the divine spark of he's saying that it's not meant to be easy. And I don't know that there's a single person in the world, I know there isn't, as he mentioned, myself included, who isn't going through a trial right now. And today, I literally was walking, just personal, and I was saying, God, like, can you just hold me tighter today? My husband left for a 3.5-week business trip, and I was just feeling overwhelmed by it. And I kept reminding myself that it's, as much as I want it to be easy and him to always be home and it to be easy and to have everything we need and to have that banquet set up for us, there will be a benefit to what he's doing. There's a reason he's supposed to be there. I don't know what that reason is, but there's the short-term reason of this is what his job needs from him, right? There's the long-term reason of there's some other reason why he should be there. Who knows? That'll determine as it goes. There will be some long-term benefit to our relationship, to have separation and coming back together, right? These are all true. That doesn't mean it's not a struggle. And in those moments I said, okay, God, just hold me tight. Just make me feel that you're there with me today. And just let me feel it when I'm losing it. Just hold me, squeeze me tight. And that's part of, I think, what the Shar B'Tachon reminds us of. It reminds us of while we're going through these things, that we're not going through it alone, and that it's for a good purpose. But even though it's for a good purpose, we're still not alone in doing it. Okay. Anybody have a comment, question before we continue? Okay. We're on the bottom of page 55. The world was created for man's use, and man is the center of a great balance. If man follows earthly pursuits and is drawn away from his creator, he is impaired, and the rest of the world is impaired along with him. If he becomes a master over himself and unites himself with his creator, using the world only to help him in the service of his creator, he is elevated and the world is elevated along with him. All creatures are elevated when they serve the complete man who is sanctified with the holiness of God. The entire universe takes on meaning when it is used to enable man to achieve the ultimate goal of creation. The universe can only be as meaningful as man is. If man fails to pursue his goal, the entire universe serves no purpose. 2 loiterers were arrested by a police officer and they appeared before the magistrate. He asked the first loiterer, "What were you doing when you were arrested?" "Nothing," the man answered. He turned to the second loiterer. "And what were you doing when you were arrested?" The second loiterer pointed to his friend and said, "I was helping him." It is clear that even the most sophisticated system with a myriad of intermediate functions is meaningless if it produces no end product or serves no purpose. Our unlimited intelligence may not be able to understand the function of many things or how they could possibly be serving man. How is it that a tiny insect in the tropical rainforest is of service to man? How are the stars that are billions of light years distant contribute to our functioning? The Midrash says that King David in his youth noticed a spider and set him to thinking of what possible use is a spider to man. When he fled later from King Shaul, he hid in a cave, and a spider spun a web over the opening of the cave. And upon seeing the spider web, Shaul concluded that the cave could not have been recently entered, and this way he did not capture David. God then said to David, "You should never question the purpose of any of my creations." This concept of everything in the universe being directed towards man's ultimate goal is far-reaching and places an immense responsibility on man. The Talmud states that if a person partakes of the goods of the world without reciting the appropriate blessing, he is essentially stealing from God. The goods of the world were meant to be used to enable us to develop himself spiritually. When man fails to do so, he is misappropriating materials that were entrusted to him for a specific purpose. And that is the equivalent of stealing from God. And again, we want to bring this back to always at our level of understanding and action and always growing, right? It can be thinking first about saying thank you and appreciating your food. It can be learning the blessing. It can be, every day starting the day with a blessing. And it's a level of growth. It isn't, it's not something that has to come overnight and that we're stealing until the moment we have perfected some level of perfection. In Stories That Inspire podcast, they were talking about some of these huge, big name, rabbis who run big yeshivas who took on themselves to be more careful with blessings and how they really to have more intention with their blessing, because even they can get distracted, can be busy, can not say it or not say it with meaning. So it's not something that anybody should look to themselves and like, oh my gosh, it's something so unachievable. It's something that's worth pursuing, that's worth struggling with. I want to pause here and I'd love to hear from you guys. What's resonating with you so far? What's maybe feeling complicated? And then we can continue. What are your thoughts? Who's on? Who has something to share?
I don't mind sharing something quick, but I'm actually on my way to bar mitzvah. So I'm putting on my shoes as I speak, and that's just going to be a very quick thought. First of all, hi everyone. So nice to be back with you all. Hope you had a lovely Yom Tov. So what you were saying about tranquility is actually something I was going through with a client of mine who he has severe ADHD, as do I, and I understand his wish is a young boy. He loves it in yeshiva. He's not from the most, he's not from a Haredi family. He's from a religious family, but, they didn't expect him to stay in yeshiva. They want him to go to uni. And all the exams and the stress and the corporate world that he's being invited into, he just gets so in his head about it and said to me, I can't deal. I just want to be, I love it in yeshiva because there's a structure and it's just so calming and soothing. And I feel so good when I'm with my Rebbe and I know what to do and nothing is being expected of me. And I thought of this thing that you said, you quoted Bikesh Yaakov Lashevet B'Shalva. It's a very famous Talmud where Yaakov always wanted to stay in tranquility. And I said, there's another place where you learn, don't always study Torah with my clients, but he was a yeshiva boy, so I thought he'd get it. There is a place where it says, oh yeah, it's in Tehillim. David HaMelech, he says, Achat she'alti me'et Hashem, od havakesh, shivti bevet Hashem kol yimei chayai. There's only one thing I want in my life. I want to stay in the house of God all the days of my life. So I said to him, how do you reconcile those two things? The one, Yaakov was told, you can't. And David is clearly saying, that's what I want. And that's okay, because it stayed in the Tehillim. So what we came to the understanding was that there's two ways of looking at the thing. To want the tranquility for its own sake, you're not going to be in a hotel room all your life, looking out at the sea and palm trees and just looking at a beach because you aren't going to grow. But what you can do is you can take the verse Achat she'alti and you can bring it into your life. So wherever you are, there is a possibility, and that's what my coaching is all about. Wherever you are, you have that liberty to choose tranquility. And I know it sounds insane because we're in the middle of a war. And I'm in the middle of a whole bunch of stuff. And so is everyone, right? But we always get to choose in the moment. We do. We get to choose, and there is a possibility of choosing, because every time we have fear, there is an equal amount of courage in us, even more. It's unlimited. We have access to the divine within us. So every test that we have, there's an unlimited amount of the thing that fulfills that and calls us forward. And it's accessing that thing that makes us remember, like you said, you connect with Hashem, you're in the tranquility already. You don't have to, it's only a part that we're playing. And once you get it, there's at the beginning of, I remember there's a very powerful pasuk at the beginning of Shar HaBitachon. And it's, the pasuk is, Ki v'ka Hashem sur olamim. And it's brought down in Kabbalah that this verse, Ka, the word Ka, Yud, Hey, the Yud is the 10, and the Hey is the 5. The 10 represents Hashem in all his wisdom, who understands the both sides, Olam Haba, Olam Hazeh, and parallel shifts that are happening. And the Hey is our limited view of where we are. We only see a half of it. We only see the part that we see. It's limited. But when we recognize and admit, Ki v'ka Hashem sur olamim, when we access the Emunah, then Hashem doesn't need to hide anymore. He can bring out the Yud. And so it's by getting to the tranquility, it's by getting to the Emunah that actually brings the physical tranquility to us. So when we believe in the good, it's not just empty words that Lubavitcher Rebbe said, when you tracht good, it will be good. It physically happens in this world, because there's no reason for it not to. Because the only reason it wasn't there was because Hashem wanted you to get to that place where you could see it. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Very deep, but it's a beautiful concept. So I thought I'll share it with you because it made sense to me from what you said. That the tranquility, there's nothing wrong with tranquility and wanting tranquility, but the invitation is for us to find that tranquility, and it's there already. So,
And it's independent of the circumstances, right? And
I mean, it's difficult. Look, there's a war. How are you finding tranquility in a war? And you can't find it always in the moment. You can't. You know, we're in a war, right? But somehow, like Viktor Frankl said, even in the concentration camps, he was able to go into his deepest connection and find meaning in that place. It doesn't happen overnight. The way that I personally understand it is just like you said, you have to ask God to help you find that place. You can't do it on your own. But that is the call. That is our call. That is what we're being asked to do, I think.
I brought that up because again, we're talking about Yom HaShoah today, also in connecting our learning in that merit. It's very powerful to remember that they taught us this message as well. Elie Wiesel, Viktor Frankl, talked about, that even in the most darkest, horrible moments, having an exquisitely beautiful and painful view of what meaning and fulfillment are in all situations. Beautiful. We're on page 57. In relation to the stones of the place Jacob took and put around his head, Rabbi Yitzchak said, this teaches us that the stones gathered themselves into one spot, each saying, let the tzaddik place his head upon me. Our sages emphasized this principle when they said, seek the word of God. When God created Adam, he took before all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said, see how beautiful and praiseworthy all my works are. Everything I've created was created for your sake. Be cautious that you do not damage and destroy my world. Of all the creatures, man alone was given free will to choose between doing good or evil. Thus, though there should be a natural attraction of man toward his ultimate goal, the divine wisdom set up a counter force, the Yetzer Hara, to deter man from his goal, so that there would be true freedom of choice. With the exception of man, everything else in creation should gravitate toward its ultimate goal. And this is again, in health, in money, in all of these areas, in relationships. Why do we sometimes pulled to do the thing that we know will be sabotaging, that we know will be counterproductive? And we get mad at ourselves or judge ourselves for having a desire to do something that would be inappropriate in that situation or unhelpful. That's natural. That's that moment of struggle. We bring awareness to it and we're like, oh, now is the time to call on my bitachon. Now is the time to ask for help, to set the standard. I want to choose good. I'm going to make a plan to protect myself to choose good and ask for help, and now move forward and accept that this craving was an invitation and an opportunity. This monetary challenge, this relationship challenge is the opportunity to develop something better. And to make choice, to exercise our free will. The Talmud says, have you ever seen a bird or a beast agonize over its livelihood the way a man does? Now, if these creatures were created to serve me and provided with the means of their survival, why do I have to agonize over mine? It is only because I have done wrong and thereby sabotaged my livelihood. If man were to live a truly spiritual life and pursue his ultimate goal, everything in creation would be subservient to him and gravitate towards him, seeking its own fulfillment by being service to man. This is the key belief of manifestation. There was the status of Adam in the Garden of Eden, when all of nature subordinated itself to him. And it was only after Adam sinned by submitting to the temptation and turning away from the pursuit of spirituality that nature was no longer subject to serve his needs, and it was decreed that he would have to wrest his livelihood from the land by the sweat of his brow. Yet to the degree that a person pursues his ultimate goal, to that degree will nature subordinate itself to his needs, and the Talmud points out the example that the stones of Jacob gathered. And still, even though all of nature subordinated itself to Adam's needs, he still had a craving, a temptation to do something inappropriate. That will never go away. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It means, in fact, that you are having opportunities to exercise your free will. I'm having opportunities to exercise my free will. To recapitulate, man was not created for his position in the world, but for his position in the world to come. Being in this world is but a means toward his station in the world to come, which is his ultimate goal. Our sages describe this world as a place of preparation, and the next word is a place of rest and partaking of what has been prepared. This is also their intent when they say this world is an antechamber. Today, the world is for performance of mitzvot. Tomorrow is for receiving reward. Truthfully, no intelligent person can believe that the purpose of man's creation would be for his position in this world. For what is man's life in this world? Who is truly happy and content in this world? The days of life are 70 years, and if one is robust, 80 years, and the strongest of these is but a travail and inequality, with so many different kinds of suffering and disease and pain and burdens, and following all this death, not even 1 in 1,000 can be found for whom the world has provided an abundance of gratifications or true peace. If a person does not believe in God and in creation and assumes the world to be something of which just happened, that everything is the result of the undesigned natural consequences of physical laws, it is meaningless to talk about a goal and a purpose in life. Goal and purpose of man presuppose a creator and a design for the universe which make it purposeful. Unless one were to attribute to the creator mischief at best, or frank cruelty at worst, it is absurd to consider this earthly world as the ultimate purpose of creation, and the place of the man is to realize his ultimate goal. As the Ramchal points out, the proportion of misery to contentment in this world is so overwhelmingly top-heavy on the negative side that one would have to attribute an inordinate degree of ineptness to the intelligence that designed it, which is totally incompatible with the concept of supreme being. Attributes of wisdom, justice, and benevolence, which are understood as being attributes of the Creator, do not permit us to accept the earthly world with its dominance of suffering and distress as the ultimate goal of man. We can come only to one conclusion, that there is another existence where the benevolence of God is enjoyed, and that the hardships of existence in this world are but means to attain the true good in the world to come. And I think we live in a time with the most blessings and privileges that the Jewish people have enjoyed, even in this war, to any situation that we have been in historically to up to this point. And still, in the moment of anybody's suffering, it just, but I think that we are also in a place to further and further and further find the beauty. And that is what the Shar B'Tachon is about, is bringing and elevating ourselves to the place of seeing the appreciation and seeing the gratitude. And what he's describing, we all know people like that. We've all maybe been that person at some point in our life who felt so overwhelmed by the suffering of humanity that it was overwhelming to us. I know I feel that way when I think about the suffering of others and Jews all over the world. And, it's crazy, but a few years ago when there were I'm from Los Angeles, there were the riots again in Los Angeles, and I was just in tears about the suffering. Like, how can we be going through this again? Now it's like, wow, it's so much worse. Back then, that was like, how could the people be doing this? It was so upsetting. How can there be so much suffering in the world? And it's a human, healthy, natural question to ask. But the answer is also self-evident. This world is obviously not only for personal pleasure. It's simply not what it's about. Furthermore, if man had been created solely for the sake of existing in this world, there would have been no need for his being inspired with a soul so exalted as to be greater than that of the heavenly angels, especially since the soul derives absolutely no dissatisfaction at all from earthly pleasures. This is what our sages teach us, and also the soul shall not be satisfied. It is analogous to the case of a peasant who marries a princess. Even if he bought her all his worldly possessions, they would mean nothing to her. By virtue of her being so accustomed to the palatial surroundings, so is the soul. Even if we were supplied with every pleasure of this world, they would provide nothing for the soul, since it is so much loftier spiritual nature. That is why our sages say you were created against your will and you were born against your will, because the soul has no desire to be in this world. Certainly the Creator would not have created for the soul a world that opposes its nature and which it despises. Okay. Whereas the Ramchal approaches the absurdity of believing that the earthly world would be the ultimate goal of man by virtue of the compatibility of the spiritual soul with physical pleasures, that the divine soul being of this world is an unpleasant ordeal, we can arrive at the same conclusion from another aspect. You know that ignorance is bliss? The scriptural statement, the wiser the one is, the more he suffers, to attest the correlation of increased wisdom with the increased distress. Cows in this pasture don't have worries, they don't have anxieties, they don't have depression. Animals in the wild are far less stressed than intelligent human beings. The goal of life was just to be content, then bestowing superior intelligence on us was a grave mistake. Man was better off functioning with the animal instinct characteristic of lower forms of life. If someone saw a child dressed in a coat whose sleeves reached the floor and a hat fell over his eyes, one would immediately conclude that the child had put on his father's clothes. Clothes that are so far beyond his size could not have been designed for him. If we appreciate the vastness of human intellect, it is clear that it was not designed primarily to enable us to achieve maximum contentment in this world. Something of much lesser capacity and sophistication would have been far better suited for achieving contentment. The ability of man to think abstractly, to philosophize, to meditate on infinity is an indication that there's much more to man's existence than gratifying one's physical drives. That the human mind could have composed works such as Ecclesiastes, the Book of Job, is the greatest testimony to the spiritual goal of man. Works such as these that analyze the nothingness of the material world and the problem of why the just are subjugated to suffering are totally out of place in a world designed for contentment. It has been said that it requires great fortitude to be a believer. Perhaps so, but requires even greater fortitude to be a non-believer. True, the belief in God leaves one with the conclusion that human suffering makes no sense, but not believing leaves one with the conclusion that nothing makes any sense. And again, this is why we learn Shara B'Tachon first, because like he says, we begin with the belief that God is good and that every single thing that is happening is for the good. And that gives us the courage to invite him in, and that he's going to answer our prayers, and that we are going to, that each suffering is not suffering on top of suffering on top of suffering. It's suffering and resolution, suffering and resolution, suffering and resolution, suffering and growth. You know, we don't just add up incidents in our life. We are able to grow and process each trauma and become more whole in the process. This was super a lot today, so I want to stop here and go around if anybody has anything that resonated with them today that they want to share. If anybody a B'Tachon experience or Pesach, happy to have a conversation. And then we'll continue same time next week. This will be our time for the summer. I hope that works for everybody. I asked in the group. Anybody have anything to share, something that resonated with them today, or a unique thought that you might have based on your life experience? You may please feel free to share, or something you've seen or read in a book. Connie, I saw you sit up. What are you thinking? You can't unmute yourself? Try it now.
Okay, you hear me? Yeah.
I have to hop off. I'm just at the house of the bar mitzvah, so I'm going to run of the bar mitzvah, so I have to run. But thank you, Lily, for such a beautiful shiur. Gorgeous. I can't wait to see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. We heard you. I enjoyed listening to you, by the way.
Oh, bless
Shalom,
you.
right?
You can always listen to me. You can always call me for chat.
Okay.
Nobody else likes listening. They wish I would go away and shut up. Lovely. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Okay, take care. So, whoops, am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. First of all, Lily, thank you very much, and missed you. It's been a while. And I, when you were telling me about what you're going through with your husband not being there, my heart goes out to you. I'm a strong empathizer, and it brought me to tears. So I'm with you. Yeah, and this is a thing that I struggle with. When I hear other people going through different struggles, I have family members who are suffering from different things, and it's not in my control at all what things that they're going through, but it's like the pain is so strong, and it's so hard for me to disassociate from that. You know, that those things are that's something that's one of my challenges is to learn how to still be there for them and pray for them, but not get stuck in in their pain as well. You know what I mean? That this is one of my challenges. So that's something that I have to work on. So I need a
How can this concept of their challenges, them playing a character with this challenge designed by the divine creator specifically for them, to develop something within that. That there's nothing for you to fix because there's nothing wrong. There's a struggle that they were created to experience for some pleasure that's so great that it's beyond our comprehension, whether or not they overcome the struggle. But just for struggling with it and for attempting and for working through their challenges, and we can pray on their behalf that they should get also a positive outcome. But there's something to that separation on the empathy level of this is something that was uniquely designed, and that they are, you know, when I think about the hostages, I get very emotional and very upset. Then I visualize God sitting with them and being with them. Like he's with me, oh, he's with them. He is 100% with each and every single one of them, helping them, guiding them through whatever they're going through, and making sure they are going to have what they're supposed to have, you know, in the end. And that whether it's in this world or it's in the next world, and what they're, you know, whatever is going to be, that they are not alone there. I dive in for that, and I vision that in my mind, and it helps me. It helps me to deal with that, like, I know what you're talking about, that empathy, you know? And if you think about me and my husband, what I think about is, okay, so I am getting this challenge to deepen the intimacy in our relationship using so many other love languages, you know, working on a bitachon, trusting that there's a reason he's meant to be there. There's a reason I'm meant to be here. There's a reason this has to happen right now. You know, all of these things that are good and be for our good. So wanting it not to happen isn't hopeful, but praying for me and praying for us that we should get every bit of good use out of it, and that we should navigate it with love is super appreciated. And the more prayers, the better, right? When we think about, you know, going through, and every single person I hope is going to light a candle, you know, tonight, tomorrow, for Yom HaShoah, and every candle that's lit for, you know, how many years later, and every person who's learned and every person who's doing things is part of this impact, you know, that these people had, not even knowing that they were going to have this impact, not even knowing how many people are going or were impacted for generations by what they went through, you know, and what we're going through now, which is, you know, a whole nother thing, right? And there's something that he said, it's worse to not be a believer.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
as much as you think about the struggles that your family has, you've had your own struggles, right?
Sure. This is, yeah.
You a better person?
Sorry?
Has your struggles made you a better person?
I believe so. Yes. Yes,
so
yes.
Only we will never see how someone else's struggle made them a better person, because it's not ours. We can only look at our own struggle that was tailored to us so specifically, and been like, you know, I see what that gave me. Sometimes it takes years to see, or a lifetime, but we see it. And we have to trust that, you know, it says in the Shar Bitachon, when you don't have what you need today, remember when you were a baby and you nursed from your mother and there was always milk. You know, like we have to learn from our own experience that to reaffirm the trust, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Lala, no force to share. Is there anything you want to share? You're good today. Non-sharing day, no problem. So I am so excited for everybody. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you guys same time next week to continue learning.
Thank
So,
you.
Love you guys.